All right. So, hello, everyone. Good morning from Winter Park, Florida. Good evening for the folks joining us from India, and just slightly later in the afternoon for the folks who are joining us from Brazil. So, it's good to see you all. We have some great faces here on the Zoom. We'll let other folks in as they enter. And of course, we are live on Facebook. So, that's wonderful as well. Just a reminder for folks, because we are live on Facebook, if you don't like to have your name and your photo in the same place at the same time, you could rename yourself now if you would like to do that. Also, a reminder that we will take a screenshot, and so we'll let you know when that is. And if you're not able to put your camera on before then for sure we'll ask you to do that at the time. So enough of those crazy logistics. My name is Mary Conway Datoon. I'm the faculty director at the Global Links Initiative. And we have our wonderful founder of the Global Links Initiative, Rick Goings, online. So Rick, it's great to see you, and we hope to hear a few words from you later. But let's sort of jump right into what we're here to talk about today. And we are so happy to be featuring our partner organization, the Presidential Precinct. And we've been working with the Presidential Precinct for several years now. And today we want to chat with them about building a world of change makers, and particularly the youth engagement that they work with. And so we are going to speak with Neil Piper and Nancy Hopkins, and the conversation will be facilitated by our program manager, Yasmin Mesbah. Before I turn it over to Yasmin, I just want to take a moment and share our most updated infographic, and you'll see some faces on here that you will recognize, and it'll tell you a little bit about the Global Links Initiative. And so our scholars to date, you see on to my left side of the screen, from Dr. Amel Abed Muhammad Ali from Iraq, Dr. Banerjee, who's joining us online. Hi, Dr. Banerjee. Dr. Rumpa Chakraborty, who's also online with us. Oh, there she is. Hi, Dr. Chakraborty. Dr. Delboni and Marielsa Cavalieri, who will be our 2122, will be joining us a little bit later. And so you see from our infographic, right, across the three phases, but that we run. And what we're really going to talk about today is the importance of phase 2 and phase 3, and that's the student interface, because today's emphasis is about the youth and student engagement and the impact that they have. So we really want you to think about how we do a train the trainer model, and the students go out into the field to work with female entrepreneurs and really improve their business, ask them to reflect on their social impact as well as their environmental impact. And to date, we've worked with over 5,000 students in Iraq, Brazil, India, and here in the United States. And we look forward to our next endeavor where we'll work with even more. And we're also happy to say we have a couple change makers with us online. So Luis, good to see you from Brazil. And Shradipta, great to see you, who's been with us for quite some time. And Sanchari, lovely to see you as well. So with those very brief introductions, let me go ahead and turn it over to Yasmin, who will introduce our speakers, Neil and Nancy, and we'll go ahead and get started. So I'll stop sharing my screen now. Yasmin?
Thank you, Dr. Conway. We're very happy to have Neil and Nancy here with us, and I'm very excited to be leading the conversation between the two of them. Before we get started with that, I will briefly introduce Neil and Nancy. So Neil is the executive director of the Presidential Precinct, which he actually helped launch. In his position, Neil empowers leaders from more than 150 countries through knowledge and networks to transform communities around the world. Prior to helping launch the Presidential Precinct, Neil held positions where he led various social responsibility programs designed to expand and enhance healthcare services and infrastructure worldwide. Neil spent a decade managing teams worldwide and creating innovative solutions for Fortune 100 companies, startups, and non-governmental organizations. Today, Neil continues to be committed to the mission of building thriving, just, and free societies globally. Welcome, Neil.
Thank you.
And we also have with us Nancy. Nancy is the Director of Programs at the Presidential Precinct. Nancy has over 2 decades of experience in international development and the nonprofit sector, including leadership positions with the Asia Foundation, Oxfam America, Ashoka, and the Harvard Institute for International Development. Prior to joining the precinct, she ran her own Charlottesville-based consulting practice, providing program development, evaluation, fundraising, and research services to several leading international nonprofit organizations. Throughout her career, Nancy worked in numerous countries, including Cambodia, Bangladesh, India, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, and South Korea. So welcome, Nancy.
Thank you so much.
So to get us started a little bit here today, I'm hoping that you can tell us and tell the audience here a little bit about the work that Presidential Precinct does. So what is the mission that you try to accomplish through the Presidential Precinct, and what are some of the programs offered to help you achieve that mission? So if you could get us started with that, Neil.
Yeah, thank you very much, Yasmin. I first want to say what an honor it is to be amongst what I would call our family from Global Links. It's been such an honor to work with you all over the past 3 or 4 years, and working with some really inspiring leaders from around the world, including you, Yasmin. And so what an honor it is for both Nancy and I to be here with you all and you know, the Global Links community. So I'm Neil Piper at the Presidential Precinct, and the Presidential Precinct was started with the idea that young leaders can inspire change around the world. And our mission really is to bring really visionary young people to what we call the birthplace of modern democracy, to engage and inspire them and to create networks so that we can really accelerate their work so they can make lasting change in their communities around the world. And we do this by bringing together 2 public universities, the University of Virginia and the College of William & Mary, and then 3 historic sites, the home of one of the founding presidents, James Madison, James Monroe, and as well Morven. And the Presidential Precinct hosts fellowships such as the Mandela Washington Fellowship for Young African Leaders. We host forums such as the Global Leadership Forum that we've hosted in partnership over the years with Global Links. And then we create signature initiatives. We've got a signature initiative working on around democracy and bringing leaders from around the world for that program. But we also engage leaders through virtual programs and networks. And so as part of our model, we bring leaders here who are already doing really amazing things, that are going to do, they're already, you know, demonstrating success, and leaders come here and learn from one another. And so we have facilitators that really work to bring out different ideas that they have for, you know, creating change in their countries, provide networks and tools. And so our programs last anywhere from 2 days to 6 weeks long in duration. And then as leaders go home, they stay in close communication through a digital network that we call the Presidential Precinct Network, which looks a lot like Facebook, but a private network for ongoing collaboration.
Thank you, Neil. And you touched on a few critical components, which we at the Global Links Initiative believe in as well. It's actually one of our values, this idea of community building and building a network of change makers around the world. So Nancy, could you then tell us, based on your background and your experiences, what is it about the work that the Presidential Precinct does that kind of drew you to join that organization?
Yeah, Thanks so much for having us today. We're delighted to be here for this virtual reunion with our Global Links friends. So great to see you, Global Links team, and also the Changemakers, who we've had an incredible opportunity to host here in Charlottesville, Luis, Sridita, and Sanchari. And I caught a glimpse of Sanchari, and if I'm correct, I think she might be wearing her Presidential Precinct t-shirt. So thank you for repping the precinct today. It's awesome to see. So yeah, I think what really drew me to this work and to the precinct in particular is this idea that individuals can create positive change. I mean, we really believe in the transformative power of people to create change. And there are lots of great organizations that invest in projects or invest in organizations or systems. And I think we need all of that, but we really believe in the power of individuals. And we've hosted over 1,200 leaders since our founding in 2012. And we remember each one of them and their impactful work. And as we follow their leadership path and their journey as they return to their home countries, we can see the impact and feel the impact that they're making on a day-to-day basis. So it's really kind of the leader first approach that drew me to this work for sure.
Thank you, Nancy. And as I'm listening to you, I can't help but draw connections to the work that we do at the Global Links Initiative, because our mission at the Global Links Initiative is to empower women through education and entrepreneurship. But the way we do that is by giving students the tools that they need to be the ones who are creating that change, who are empowering that woman. So the work that the Presidential Precinct does, very similar to the Global Links Initiative, is one that focuses on youth engagement and harnessing the power of youth to be leading the change. So could you tell us, Nancy, from your experience, why is this model of change making, the one that utilizes youth engagement, powerful and effective?
Yeah, I mean, I think just speaking from the US experience, here in the US, we see every day that it's really youth who are on the front lines of social change. If you look at, three of the biggest and most influential grassroots movements that are on deck right now in the US, youth are on the front lines. I think it's just a really persuasive example of the power of youth to create sustained change. And these groups are not just inspirational, but seriously effective. I'm thinking about movements like the Sunrise Movement, which is a youth movement to curb climate change and create millions of good green jobs in the process. They're building a whole army of young people to make climate change an urgent policy priority for the US and equipping them with the skills and the tools and the mindsets they need to advocate for change. I'm really inspired by the March for Our Lives, which, as I think folks around the world know, was formed out of a tragedy, a tragic shooting at a high school in Parkland, Florida, that claimed the lives of 17 students. They've organized a huge nationwide movement against gun violence in America and harnessing the power of young people on this issue. And also looking at the Black Lives Matter movement. This movement's been around for nearly a decade to amplify systemic racism and violence against Black Americans, but it gained tremendous support about a year ago in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. And within 24 hours of Mr. Floyd's death, demonstrations were organized across the US in half a dozen US cities, huge demonstrations, shining a light on this important issue. And the face of these protests is really young Americans at the forefront of this movement, millennials and Gen Zs. So, and these movements have a lot of things in common that make them very effective, like their focus and their values driven. They take an intersectional approach. I think, these are some of the key values that are embedded certainly in your work at Global Links and ours as well. Maybe when we get to the Q&A, we'd love to hear examples from other countries about how youth are on the front lines of these movements. But those are just, some kind of large scale examples of the power of youth. And the folks that we bring to Program in the Precinct are involved in similar efforts in their own countries.
Thank you, Nancy. It's wonderful. It's so energizing and inspiring to hear about the work that people are doing around the world. Neil, would you share from your experience, your perspective about youth engagement and how it's a powerful change-making tool?
Yeah, it's for our experience at the Presidential Precinct, just seeing the transformation that happens when leaders come together. And, many times, some of the leaders we host haven't had an opportunity to visit bordering countries and meet people from those countries. And so for us, it's the experience that they have sharing, similarities and differences between cultures and sharing new ideas with one another and hearing about the work that others are doing in their countries to create change. There's a lot of similarities in the types of work that people are doing, but they haven't had an opportunity to get out of their community to see other really inspiring leaders. And I think that really demonstrates what's possible for the fellows that we host. And so that's really, I think the networks that they create while they're here and really refining their ideas. And I think it's really important for any leader at any stage of life to really step out of one's own environment, because you get into rhythms, you get into habits, and to be able to step away, go somewhere different into almost a retreat mode and really think big, because oftentimes our days are, they go very quickly. There's a lot of tasks that happen and to-do lists that need to happen, but we rarely step back and do deep thinking and learn from one another. And so I think that's one of the most powerful parts of these types of fellowships that, the Global Links and the Presidential Precinct hosts. And we've just seen some really incredible things over the years. And what's really fascinating is the further you get out, we're only 8 years old as an organization, and we just hosted alumni reunions for 6 different cohorts over 6 years. And one of the leaders is now the Nigerian ambassador to Romania, and who came through 6 years ago on a program, and just really seeing the changes of kind of confidence in leaders and how they're working together. We had a group of leaders 4 years ago that from 6 different countries met here for the first time and created the Pan-African Leadership Incubator to help multiply leaders and help young people get into political office. And so it's just a truly powerful experience for young people and when they get home.
That's wonderful.
Yasmin, I was just going to build on
Yeah.
that and circle back to something you said in the beginning, which is the critical importance of community building. I think the truth is that leadership can be lonely at times. And I think programs like Global Links or the work that the Precinct does, can really create this peer support network for people who have big dreams and big ideas about how to create social change. Because it can be heavy sometimes and it can be hard. And I think we've seen just the power of that peer support network. I was thinking, Neil mentioned these reunions that we had with some of our African fellows. And in those reunions, so many mentioned about how through the years, dating back to, when they first met in 2014, they've served as a shoulder to lean on or a network of support or advice. About a year ago, the political situation in Zimbabwe started to deteriorate quite rapidly. And one of our fellows, our Zimbabwean fellows, was in a really tough situation. And fellows, not just from Zimbabwe, but from all across Africa, really rallied around the fellows in that country. They created a support group, they created hashtags, they had webinars like this, where they talked about how youth can be a force for good in Zimbabwe. That kind of peer network and the self-organizing that happens long after folks leave our programs, I think is kind of a real testament to the power of that community.
That's wonderful. And I can testify from seeing the work that the Presidential Precinct does firsthand, how inspired the leaders are always at the end of those immersions and those gatherings. So I can definitely see and hear the societal benefit that the program offers. I'm hoping you could tell us, and I heard you touch on that a little bit, but maybe we can expand a little bit on how this opportunity of being involved through programs like the Presidential Precinct and the different fellowships you offer benefits the youth participating on an individual level. Neil, do you want to get us started on that one?
Yeah, maybe I could share a personal story of my own journey. And, as a young professional, I spent, 10 years of my career in healthcare, and I was at Pfizer as kind of a mid-level professional. And there was a fellowship within the company called the Global Health Fellowship. And it's a 6-month fellowship to go to another country and help, strengthen healthcare capacity. And I moved to Swaziland and worked in healthcare there. And for me, after college, I went right into this role at Pfizer, and an incredible experience, but I wasn't exposed to a lot of different leaders within the company. And so it gave me an opportunity to go to our New York headquarters. There were 25 fellows that went out every year for the company in this program. And here I am now, sitting next to, the scientists who developed, Zoloft, and the vice president of the company. And we were all together and in this together as equals. And, I think having those networks and exposure to other really high level leaders at that point. And then I think the other piece for me, and I'm going to parallel this back to our work, is in having this new experience, being on the ground somewhere different by myself. And I've met all these new amazing leaders and learned so much more. I thought I was going to go and contribute, but quite honestly, I learned more than anything that I could have shared in my time in Swaziland. And, that changed me forever. It changed my whole career track. In fact, that's why now I'm working with a nonprofit because of the work and what I saw on the ground there. I left healthcare to then go into leadership development. And so, going back to the work that we do, and I believe what Global Links does is, I think people are looking for new experiences, new opportunities, new connections, new way of thinking. And so I just share that personal story because we see this time and time again when people come here, is they leave and they truly are transformed, and their life is never the same again. And some of their best memories are the memories of those networks that they built and established, and those relationships that endure today. Because quite honestly, in life, it's really about our collection of personal relationships that are most meaningful, and then that impact that we're able to make in the world through those connections. And so it's a really powerful thing to see and be a part of. And it's a true honor to get to wake up every day and be a part of it.
Thank you, Neil. And I speak on behalf of our change makers who participated in the Global Leadership Forum, but I think they will concur that the experience was also transformative for all of them to be able to witness the work that happens all around the globe that is similar to what they're trying to achieve in their communities. So I can testify firsthand that everything you've said is spot on. So thank you for sharing that. Nancy?
Yeah, I was wondering maybe if it would be helpful in response to your question to lift the curtain a little bit on how we do programming, because you asked about sort of how does it benefit the folks who participate. So maybe if I could just describe, like give an example of
Please,
a program
yes.
that we run and kind of how those learning objectives reinforce each other. So I think one hallmark of our programming, and certainly that of Global Links as well, is that while we're able to draw on top academic resources for the programming, it's really very hands-on and practitioner focused. And we ground, everything in rigorous theory and scholarship, but then rapidly pivot to the question of how these concepts can be used to change the world, right? Really action focused. And a lot of our programming, in fact, all of it really requires kind of mixed methods programming. And we start with, a very clear idea of what the learning objectives are, and then structure the program around it. And maybe I'll give an example of a program that we did in 2019 called the Global Pathfinder Summit that was a partnership with the state of Virginia here in the US. This was one of the biggest programs that we did. It brought 150 leaders from 50 countries to Charlottesville. And the purpose was to deepen their understanding of the connections between democracy and civic engagement, and to impart new skills that they can use in their day-to-day work as they pursue public life and civic engagement, and also to build that peer support network that we talked about. So because it's a high profile event, of course, we've got to have, our plenary sessions with the inspirational speakers and panelists. We were delighted to host the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Ralph Gonsalves, who talked about his reflections on leadership. And also Wael Ghonim, who is an Egyptian digital activist who was one of the leaders of the Arab Spring. Really interesting reflections from those colleagues and others. We do then kind of deep dive breakout sessions and hands-on workshops. Often we let folks choose which one they want to participate in. We had one that delved into the Human Freedom Index, which is a ranking of the level of human freedom in countries across the world. And so our participants kind of examined the data from their countries and had a good conversation about how data can be used to drive social change. And another workshop was on storytelling, for example, storytelling to advance your mission. We also deployed in a really hands-on component of that program, all 150 colleagues out to our community for community service. We split them up into small groups, and they did everything from painting a public mural to organizing a food pantry to pulling weeds in a community garden. And so that gave them insights into what civic engagement and civic leadership looks like in our community. And we often have a project-based learning component. Maybe I can drop this in the chat when I have a moment. Over the course of the week, the participants created this thing called the Virginia Declaration, which is an articulation of principles and commitments that they pledged to make to advance civic engagement in their countries and their communities. And it really came together well. And then, of course, we always have to incorporate fun and social and cultural engagement, because that's a big part of the relationship building. We had a barbecue and bluegrass event where people sampled American food and American music. And as we all know, some of the best stuff happens, as you're walking across the lawn and looking at the sunset or drinking a cup of coffee together. That's where the relationships are really built. So yeah, that sort of conceptual grounding, the skill building, and the relationship building kind of all really work together to support these incredible young leaders in their work. And we just try to create the framework for that, the safe space and the brave space where they can really learn together.
That's wonderful. I mean, I'm so energized just listening to you. I feel like I want to sign up to be part of one of those fellowships. So,
anytime.
Thank you. So all the work that you do, I mean, it's really wonderful, right? But we know that to make a project or a program successful, you have to have people wanting to be engaged in it. So from your perspective and your experience, what is it about programs like the ones offered by the Presidential Precinct or the Global Links Initiative that make youth attracted to it, that make them want to be engaged in them beyond just, let's say, what they do in school or what they do at work? What is it about these programs that draws youth to them, Nancy?
And I would love to hear Neil's thoughts on this too, but it's our experience that young people today are looking for opportunities and professional development initiatives and programs that really speak to both the head and the hands, and I guess the heart as well. So maybe it's all three. They're looking for insights on the issues that they care about. They're looking for really practical skills that they can use to make change, and ways to make, as I said, their dreams a reality. And I think they're also looking for authenticity. That's a really big principle, I think, for us. Places to have open and honest conversations about some of these tough issues. I don't think young people today want to gloss over problems or are looking for easy solutions. In fact, we find it's the opposite. People want to dig in and get to the heart of the matter and the toughest parts and really puzzle it out together. And I think that that creates that to create that takes a lot of trust. It takes this trust building process to build those authentic relationships and authentic experiences. So those are just some things that come to my mind in terms of what I think young people are looking for as they explore their own leadership journeys. How about you, Neil? What else do you think attracts folks to programs like this?
Yeah, I think you articulated it very well, Nancy. I think the only addition I would have is, new networks and new connections that can be forged and help accelerate change back in their home countries. And I'd love to hear from you as well, Yasmin, in terms of types of things that folks are learning or are hoping to gain out of the experience at Global Links?
Absolutely. Well, when we engage youth, what we offer to them is a model of immersive learning. So we give them an opportunity to take everything that they've learned in the classroom and actually apply it hands-on in a way that, to Nancy's point, engages the head and the hands and also the heart. So we've seen through our experiences, and our scholars have reflected on that, that youth want to make a difference. They want to make a change in the world. They just need the avenue to figure out how to go about it, or the tools that they need in order to implement it. But it's, for a while it was a myth that youth are maybe not engaged, or they don't care about the issues that are going on around the world. And that is a very wrong perception. I mean, Nancy spoke about that, and we've seen that they care. They're very passionate. They're very committed. And I mean, it's very incredible to see, because everything that we do at the Global Links initiative, it is extracurricular. So these students don't get class credit for it. They don't get internship credit for it. So it's complete volunteer, that they're volunteering their time. And to see that despite that, they are giving it their 100%. They're 100% engaged in what they do. They truly, fully care about their entrepreneur that they're helping. They want to make this program the best experience that it can be, even beyond the end date. So even after we're done with the in-field work and we've wrapped up all 3 phases of the program, they're still coming to say, how can we still help the Global Links initiative flourish and grow and be the best that it can be? And I mean, we have our 3 change makers here with us to testify to that, right? They are constantly looking for ways to stay engaged with the Global Links initiative. So it's just very, very energizing to see. So thank you, Nancy and Neil, both for sharing that. I want to take a moment actually to ask Rick Goings, who was one of the founders of the Global Links initiative, to also share his thoughts on this idea of youth engagement and change making through youth engagement. Rick.
I have asked Rick to unmute, but you just have to hit that. There we go.
Just unmuted. First thing, Nancy, Neil, so good to see you guys. I very much loved my time with the presidential precinct, and I'm still part of it, by the way. So, you could, I just didn't have time for certain board meetings, but I have used you guys as such an example of how a small group initially can have such big impact, and like ripples, it just goes out there. So it's just great to see this collaboration. And by the way, let me comment on that, Yasmin. During the many years I was in leadership roles and chairing Boys and Girls Clubs of America, one of the problems we saw, we had a $1.6 billion budget that we had to raise every year to take care of these 4,000 clubs that we eventually got to. But I saw, even though we tried to collaborate with organizations like Big Brothers and Big Sisters, organizations like 4-H, which is more about kids, rural kids back then. We would, even girls clubs. I mean, we had a very challenging time ever finding a way. Even scouting, they could hold a meeting at a Boys and Girls Clubs, but we couldn't get the silos broken down. And it wasn't so much about people and attitudes. It was basically the old Justice Department theory on how you find where the crooks are, you follow the money. They were all fighting for funding, and they felt the best way for them to do is to build a silo around what they do. One of the things I'm really happy to see about not only what we're doing with the World Federation of Youth Clubs is we have really created an organization of what we call collaborators for good. And we'll figure out together. I mean, we'll even share ideas with each other. How do we fund these things and make them forward? So there's been too much focus on what's different about us and not enough about what we're all trying to do together. And that's why, I mean, it's a real gray line between what happens at Presidential Precinct and what happens at Global Links, because it transcends, firstly, countries and geography. I do want to say something I think, of value of how you can have impact here. It seems like we have very few people here today, but we had, I don't know how many we initially had about a month ago, but I was asking Eleanor Steele, because we're dealing with, all these different time zones around the world. I said, how many participated before it was all said and done? The number I got was 10,000. So the content is, there is so many people out there who are hungry for this content of what you guys are talking about today. Let me comment though, but Yasmin, on your question with regard to young people today. It's interesting. One of the reasons I believe, and I studied history, I was a history and pre-law major. Why I think history is important is because it gives us really perspective. And when we talk about young people today and what they're looking for, we know that generally across the world, 60% of all young people today don't want a traditional job. They do not want to be tied to a 9 to 5. And I want to put that in perspective to you. Jobs were the birth of the industrial age in the mid 19th century. Before that, people were involved in trades. They were involved in the clergy or religion and the military. They were fishermen. They were craftsmen. They were merchants. But the traditional corporation actually wasn't created until the Dutch East India Corporation in 1600. There weren't jobs. And even this concept, when people talk about, well, it's funny when people talk about the 9 to 5 job. Well, it's interesting. The average work week in this country, the United States, in 1890 was 100 hours a week. There's only 168 hours in a week. People worked. Okay, what changed? And the reason I'm sharing this is because we're seeing this generational shift and an attitude shift again now, and it's seismic, this shift. The creation of the 9 to 5 work week came out of Ford Motor Company in the mid 1920s. And the reason they started to really shift it, they created a production assembly line. And so they did 40-hour work weeks, but they would have a first shift, a second shift, and a third shift because they had to amortize the millions they had invested in factories and plant and equipment. But the average person went down to 40 hours a week. So then it became, we've been raised, and I'm the son of parents that were raised during the Depression, that your life was defined by your work week. And now we've seen young people, they want to express themselves more. They'll work like mad at 2 a.m. in the morning online on a project or on writing or in a craft. But for them, I never will forget one of my daughters saying to me, "Dad, I don't want to spend my life in a cubicle where it is tied to the clock rather than tied to the outputs." Now, the reason I bring this is I see this dialogue happening and this narrative at Global Links and at Presidential Precinct, that these thirsty people are saying, okay, but how do I do this? How do I create a business? How do I create my own gig? As a matter of fact, Eleanor, I know you're going to send it out to, I have a dear friend of mine, I heard him at Avon back there. He wrote a book, it's just coming out in England, The Ultimate Gig. Yeah, and because this concept of gig came out of the music business of, hey, I got a gig this weekend. And that's where, and by the way, the same thing happened with actors. They called it not gigs, but projects for all the actor friends Susan and I have. But it was people that they had something they wanted to do or express. And under it, they created a model of what they did. But they had to figure out, because it's an insecure lifestyle. If you're an actor, the bulk of actors aren't working at any given, and the bulk of musicians aren't Bruce Springsteen. I mean, they're making $50 a night working at a Holiday Inn, and that's if they're in a nice big city. I mean, the reason I'm saying this is the infrastructure of both of these organizations can be repeater stations. And I know, Sharmista, we've talked about this, where we teach them, here's how you start it. Here's how you do it. That's what I was explaining to a young, he's from Tunisia, PhD, started this company affiliated, he's off the campus of University of Virginia, but I was explaining to him yesterday, you've got to come up with an idea, you design it, then you launch it in actually a learning laboratory stage. Then thirdly, you refine it or fix it. And then finally you scale it. Well, there's nobody to teach them how to do. That's why what you're doing at Presidential Precinct and what we're doing at Global Links, this is fundamental to it. And by the way, not all those ideas are going to work. They certainly didn't for me, but then you also learn from that to get back up, brush off, the hurt and the pain, and do it again.
Thank you, Rick.
This is so important what you guys are working on. So anyway, enough from me. I want 10,000 people to see this within the next month and a half, too.
Yeah, we will. I promise you, we will get that done. That's an easy goal for us. Thank you so much.
Give the long diatribe, but this is important stuff.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Rick. And speaking to the wonderful participants, right, that make all of this work possible, we have 3 of our change makers here with us today who have come prepared with questions of their own for Neil and Nancy. So first we'll hear from Luis, who is our Brazil change maker from 2019, and he was participating in the 2018 Global Leadership Forum. So Luis, whenever you're ready.
Hi guys, first of all, thank you so much for having me today. I'm delighted to see you all and also to hear from your experiences. So with that in mind, I would like to ask Neil and Nancy, also considering what Rick Goins just shared, how do you see youth engagement through the past years? And there was a notable increase. And also, what were the topics brought by them to discuss? There was a shift in those as well.
Nancy, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Thanks, Luis. So great to see you here. Wish we could be together in person, but look forward to that day one day soon, hopefully. Yeah, I think this kind of gets back to, well, certainly to something that Rick just said, which I think that more and more young people are interested in meaning making as opposed to simply money making, right? So I think that this desire to make an impact and to create meaning in your life and in the lives of others is certainly I think, a much bigger force. And we do see, I referenced, only three movements here in the United States that are really gaining so much traction for social change. Yeah, I think the short answer is yes. We see a lot more young people interested in the social change sphere. And I don't think, I've been reading up a lot on, is this a youth moment? I think it's both a moment and a movement. I mean, I think it's a permanent, it's here to stay. This is not only a moment, this is a movement. And in terms of the issues that folks are focused on, we see a lot of interest in gender equality, certainly top of the mind for so many young men and women around the world, of how we can create gender equity in society. Growing interest, and this is fantastic to see, in issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, not just in the US context, but how do these concepts play out globally in very different country contexts? A lot of our leaders are very focused on the issue of corruption and government accountability, something that really gets folks fired up as they see misuse of resources and state capture of institutions and processes. Certainly jobs, the economy, and ways that we can lift all boats. And also, I think the use of new forms of technology and the use of data as a way to drive social change. So those are some of the topics that we're starting to hear more and more about, and trying to program around in various ways.
Wonderful. It's very interesting, right, to see you work with more than 50 countries and to see that overlap of topics that everybody has a shared interest in. So thank you, Nancy. We also have with us Sridipta, who is one of our India Changemakers, and she participated also in the Global Leadership Forum, and she has a question here for us. So Sridipta.
First of all, hello everyone. It's wonderful to see all of you and interact with all of you again. So my question to Neil and Nancy would be, how can we create empathy in the minds of the youth to engage them in leading social change?
Pradeep, it's really good to see you again. Thanks. Such a great question. Empathy's, in my mind, is a hard thing to create, right? And I think, from personal experience and working with these amazing leaders from around the world, many times, the work that they're addressing is due to something happening to them personally. If you had a family member that's been impacted by a specific illness, you may want to reinvest and help drive solutions so that doesn't happen to other people. Or if you are mobilizing and working as a civic leader, and you've been arrested and you've seen abuse of power happen firsthand, to through personal experience or people that you're close to, you may want to mobilize and build an organization or bring people together to address that challenge. And so we find that a lot of the leaders that we host, they have a lot of empathy for and a lot of passion for these topics because of something that they've experienced personally. And every country has its own challenges. We see it play out every single day in the news around the world and in our own communities. And I think when people have that personal experience and you can ignite that with fuel and passion and really help spark an idea to address that, then I think you can really create change. And I think it's really important too that if someone's had a personal experience and they can talk to others who have gone through something similar and speak the same language in many ways because they've been down that road before. And I don't think you have to have that experience, but I think it really helps in terms of mobilizing and inspiring others to join a movement or organization that you're creating.
Thank you, Neil. Yeah, I mean, at Global Links, one of our values is empathy, and it's something that I teach in my classes as being the foundation of creating change or trying to start a social movement. It's that idea of empathy. It's critical. So thank you so much for sharing that, Neil. And now we also have a question from Sanchari, who's also one of our India change makers and who also participated in the Global Leadership Forum. So Sanchari.
Hello, everyone, and I'm really grateful to be a part of this. And my question would be that how has the COVID times impacted the presidential precinct's work growth? And what are the challenges or changes your organization will go through to adapt to these challenging times?
Yeah, definitely a question that's on all of our minds. I know the pandemic has affected all of us in so many different ways, you know, both personal and professional. I got to say, it's been hard for us to not be able to host young leaders for face-to-face programming here in Virginia. You know, we've become much more comfortable with this faces on the screen format over the past year, but we've been on pause, you know, for face-to-face programming for a whole year now, and hope to be able to restart in the fall once international travel resumes. But like many organizations, you know, we've really leaned into virtual programming and have actually really enjoyed experimenting with it, and have learned a lot as we have each iteration and an idea about how to use these platforms well. You know, we've done a fair number of webinars like this one and relied heavily on our network of alums as resources to give a platform to them to be able to share their ideas and their work with the world. And we've had a couple of exchanges. We just did one with some students from the University of Virginia and some students from Belgium, with multiple touch points in the virtual space, talking about the pandemic and the issue of resilience and how we can build personal resilience to get us through tough times. We've built out a couple of digital courses in partnership with the State Department for this program that we work on, usually face-to-face each summer. And that was neat to be able to build out a course on data-driven decision-making and figure out how do you create engaging online content. I know that folks at Rollins are experts on this, Mary for sure, but it was a learning curve for us of how do you, especially if something's not in real time, if it's asynchronous, how do you make sure that it's really interesting and engaging and interactive? Yep, and then we did some reunions. Neil mentioned virtual reunions with alums, which have been fantastic to catch up with everybody. And then we experimented with one thing we called a virtual cafe, where Neil and I would literally just log on once a month for an hour to we have a digital network called the Presidential Precinct Network. It's a membership-based network. So we would just put out the word that we're going to be on Zoom, and we would log on and just see who shows up. And you never knew who was going to show up. Actually, Eleanor Steele, who's on this call, Eleanor showed up, which was super fun. And we would just talk about whatever was on people's minds, and people's kids would wander by and we'd hear chickens clucking in the background, and someone would be on the beach and show us a view of the beach, or someone would be at the office and introduce us to their colleagues. It was really informal, really cool, and allowed us to keep those human connections going. But I think some of this stuff is here to stay. I think the virtual stuff, you know, is not just a substitute for face-to-face programming. I think we're going to incorporate it now pretty much in everything we do, because the truth is that some people may never have the time, ability, or resources to travel globally. But this is a way to make these connections, you know, across the world, across the oceans. And it gives us an awesome opportunity, webinars like this, a way to create connections with new colleagues and to grow and build our network.
Thank you so much, Nancy. And I mean, I know that at the Global Links team, we share your pain of not being able to interact with everyone in person. That was kind of what drives most of the work that we do, but it's so incredible to see that you've found innovative ways to go about that and to build that into future programming, right? Using it as a learning opportunity. So that's the best that we can do, is try to make the best out of the situation. So at this time, we will actually take some questions from the audience. And I have my first question here. So someone is asking, how does the immediate impact of the experiences that you offer differ from what you hear from fellows and participants several years later? Neil, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, it was really interesting to see this and hear firsthand the stories through these alumni reunion calls, because we started with the most recent year going all the way to 6 years ago. And, it's, some people were moving up in their organization already with, different roles when it was a 1 year out, or, starting some new entity. Some stories we heard where people who didn't know each other before fellowship met here and then created a new organization, one to empower women through economic opportunity in Southern Africa. And then, further out that you go, you see people moving into, even higher level leadership roles, or, raising more money for the organization. There was someone that didn't have previous fundraising experience and has already raised $1 million for their organization over the past several years, and which is just really, really incredible. And you can just see the kind of that ripple effect we were talking about, and the deeper impact as well, the further you get out from an experience. And, people relate kind of their success, although that, the folks that come through Global Links and the Presidential Precinct, they're going to be successful regardless, just because they're incredible leaders. They're already doing amazing things, but we see it more as an accelerator. And, just like a company, you can have a great idea, and back to Rick's point of, getting an entrepreneurial venture off the ground, but you need investment. You've got to have investment to get that idea off the ground. And, we think about companies and it's a financial investment into something, but in human, it's human capital, right? You've got to invest in that person, both with, connections and kind of a framework of moving an idea forward. And so, people are, when they attribute back, kind of this acceleration and kind of this curve that you want to see with a company, right? Where you're investing and then you see this kind of straight up line, and that's when it's been a success. You can see that in organizations and institutions and companies. You can also see that in people. And as you invest and push time out, you start seeing that curve go up, and it's really extraordinary to watch and see. And we've been waiting for this for a long time, because we're only 8 years old, and we're thinking, well, our hope is that when you look further out, that you're seeing folks in really amazing positions and making really big impact in it. And that's really ringing true today.
Thank you, Neil. And I have no doubt that that is true. Nancy, do you want to add any thoughts to that as kind of concluding thoughts to what Neil said?
Yeah, I mean, it's just so fantastic to be able to follow the leadership journeys of the leaders that come to the precinct. And, we find out tidbits about them in different ways. We connect with them on Facebook and we see something exciting that happens, or we have, the WhatsApp group that still is active several years later, and we see somebody drop something in there, like so casually, like, oh, by the way, decided to run for parliament, and that is gold, And so we really try to pull out some of these exciting developments in people's lives and boost them to provide, a platform for getting the word out about what they're doing. And it's just so rewarding to see, where they are 5 years out, 10 years out. We're almost 10 years out from some of our first leaders, but where will they be 20 years out? I have absolutely no doubt that we are looking at, the future heads of state, ministers of women's affairs, leading entrepreneurs, leading social entrepreneurs, heads of major organizations, global citizens. I mean, these are the folks that we have the honor of working with here at the precinct, and we can't wait to see where their journey takes them.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Neil. Thank you both so much. I mean, we can spend all day talking about this, but unfortunately, we are at the end of our time, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. But I will ask our GA to drop the social media accounts and the website of the Presidential Precinct, both here in the Zoom chat as well as on Facebook, so that everybody can go ahead and learn more about the wonderful work that you all do. And now, if everybody could turn on their cameras so we could take our group pictures, and we'll ask also Aaliyah to do that for us. So Aaliyah will let us know when she's ready so that we can put on our big smiles.
Just give me one quick second to switch the view so I can see everyone. Okay, is everybody ready? Smile. We're all set, thank you.
Wonderful, thank you, Aaliyah. Thank you so much, Neil, and thank you so much, Nancy. This was just wonderful. Thank you for your time, and thank you for everybody listening and watching. We hope you all loved it as much as I personally did. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everybody. What an honor to be here today.
Thank you,
Thanks
Neil.
so much for having us. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your day, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Good.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.